Well, good morning. Welcome to Northern Lights Spiritual Center, a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create lives we want to live. Northern Lights Spiritual Center offers practical and spiritual tools to make positive changes in our lives. We acknowledge our presence here on the traditional and unceded lands of the first peoples of Seattle, the Duwamish and Salish coastal Salish peoples. These people are still here, and we join with them in how they continue to honor and bring to light their ancient heritages. We seek to resist the erasure of Indigenous histories as we work towards honoring and inviting the truth. Please join me for our opening song by Carol and Ron Harris in this very room. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough peace and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, sweet Spirit, is in this very room. In this very room.
Well, good morning. This is the time that we set aside each Sunday for a brief meditation. A time when you can allow your body to relax, your mind to relax, and just center yourself into the divine that each and every one of us are. And knowing that each and every one of us are an expression of the divine. And so if you just find a nice spot where you can, get as comfortable as you possibly can, and just allow your body to melt into that spot. And if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, and just allow yourself to release everything that has come before this very moment. Any worries, any woes, anything. And allow yourself to free your mind. And so to start with, I would invite us to take a couple nice, deep, cleansing breaths. And as you release it, you can be audible if you choose to. Let's take a nice deep breath in. And release. Another breath in. And release. And one more breath in. And release. And today's talk is going to be focusing on rising up. And I just invite us to think of a time when you were down, you were maybe beaten down by maybe losing a job or losing a loved one, something that tore you down. Because we all have these events that happen in our lives that bring us down. And as you're thinking of that, what eventually allowed you to rise back up again? To rise up and be strong. To rise up and be courageous. To rise up and be that expression of the divine that you were always meant to be. And just try to tap into that feeling of rising up, standing tall, of being you. So just allow you to contemplate on for a few minutes. Just remember that anytime you feel beaten down, or you may have fallen in one way or another, try to remember what it feels like to raise yourself up again, to be powerful, courageous, to be resilient within your life. Because there will be times and situations in our lives that we feel down. But again, we can raise ourselves up, stand tall, be courageous and resilient in our lives. So now I just invite you to familiarize yourself with your surroundings again. Open your eyes and welcome back to your space. So today's reading, I have a couple. I couldn't make my mind up, so can't make your mind up? Do both. And it's on resilience. And this is from the Mayo Clinic staff, and it's build skills to endure hardship. Resilience means being able to adapt to life's misfortunes and setbacks. Test your resilience level and get tips to build your own resilience. When something goes wrong, do you tend to bounce back or fall apart? When you have resilience, you harness inner strength that helps you rebound from a setback or challenge, such as a job loss, an illness, a disaster, or a loved one's death. If you lack resilience, you might dwell on the problems, feel victimized, become overwhelmed, or turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms, such as substance abuse. Resilience won't make your problems go away, but resilience can give you the ability to see past them, find enjoyment in life, and better handle stress. If you aren't as resilient as you'd like to be, you can develop skills to become more resilient. The first one is adapting to adversity. Resilience is an ability to adapt to difficult situations. When stress, adversity, or trauma strikes, you still experience anger, grief, and pain, but you're able to keep functioning, both physically and psychologically. However, resilience isn't about putting up with something difficult, being stoic, or fighting it out on your own. In fact, being able to reach out to others for support is the key part of being resilient. Resilience and mental health. Resilience can help protect you from various mental health conditions, such as depression and anxiety. Resilience can also help offset factors that increase the risk of mental health conditions, such as being bullied or previous trauma. If you have an existing mental health condition, being resilient can improve your coping ability. Tips to improve your resilience. If you'd like to become more resilient, consider these tips. First one is get connected. Building strong, positive relationship with loved ones and friends can provide you with needed support and acceptance in good and bad times. Establish other important connections by volunteering or joining a faith or spiritual community. Make every day meaningful. Do something that gives you a sense of accomplishment and purpose every day. Set goals to help you look toward the future with meaning. That one, I love that one, about making everything meaningful, every day meaningful. Third is learn from experience. Think of how you coped with hardships in the past. Consider the skills and strategies that helped you through difficult times. You might even write down past experiences in a journal to help you identify positive and negative behavior patterns and guide your future behavior. Remain hopeful. You can't change the past, but you can always look toward the future. Accepting and even anticipating change makes it easier to adapt and view new challenges with less anxiety. And take care of yourself. To me, this is probably the most important. Tend to your own needs and feelings. Participate in activities and hobbies you enjoy. Include physical activity in your daily routine. Get plenty of sleep. Eat a healthy diet. Practice stress management and relaxation techniques, such as yoga, meditation, guided imagery, deep breathing, or prayer. And here's a little reading from Katie Hurley. She's a licensed clinical social worker. And what is resilience? Why is it so important? And how do you know if you're resilient enough? Resilience is typically defined as the capacity to recover from difficult life events. It's your ability to withstand adversity and bounce back and grow despite life's downturns, says Emmett Sood, MD, the Executive Director of the Global Center for Resiliency and Well-Being. Resilience is not a trampoline, where you're down one moment and up the next. It's more like climbing a mountain without a trail map. It takes time, strength, and help from people around you. And you'll likely experience setbacks along the way, but eventually you'll reach the top and look back at how you've come so far. What does it mean to be resilient? Resilience is the ability to withstand adversity. Oh, I just said that. And bounce back from difficult events. Being resilient does not mean that people don't experience stress, emotional upheaval, or suffering. Some people equate resilience with mental toughness. But demonstrating resilience includes working through emotional pain and suffering. And so it is.
So here's the last rendition of this month's chant. I've heard my faith can move mountains, and mountains all touch the sky. I've heard of angels in clouds up above, and the heavens hovering high. So I raise my eyes to the sky up above. I look to the birds as they fly. I lift my attention to focus on love, and spirit within satisfies. Yes, spirit within satisfies. I've heard my faith can move mountains, and mountains all touch the sky. I've heard of angels in clouds up above, and the heavens hovering high. Sorry. So I raise my eyes to the sky up above. I look to the birds as they fly. I lift my attention to focus on love, and spirit within satisfies. Yes, spirit within satisfies. Now you heard your faith can move mountains, and mountains all touch the sky. You've heard of angels in clouds up above, and the heavens hovering high. And we wait, and we wait, and wait. So I raise your eyes to the sky up above. You look to the birds as they fly. You lift your attention to focus on love, and spirit within satisfies. Yes, spirit within satisfies. Now we've heard our faith can move mountains, and mountains all touch the sky. We've heard of angels in clouds up above, and the heavens hovering high. So we raise our eyes to the sky up above. We look to the birds as they fly. We lift our attention to focus on love, and spirit within satisfies. Yes, spirit within satisfies. Now back to I. I've heard my faith can move mountains, and mountains all touch the sky. I've heard of angels in clouds up above, and the heavens hovering high. So I raise my eyes to the sky up above. I look to the birds as they fly. I lift my attention to focus on love, and spirit within satisfies. Yes, spirit within satisfies. No. Am I supposed to do a share first?
Yes.
You may write me down in history. You may write me down in history. With your bitter, twisted lies. With your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me. You may trod me. In the very dirt. In the very dirt. But still like dust. But still like dust. Does my fashion upset you? Why are you beset with blue? Why are you beset with blue? Just like and like sun, with the certainty, just like hope, springing high. Did you want to see me broken? Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes. Shoulders falling down like teardrops. Bringing by my soul. By my soulful cry. There's my heart's piece of film. Don't you take it off. Don't take it off of her. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hateful. But still like life, I rise. That my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. Just like moons.
So, I hope you've all recognized that famous poem from Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. They chose that, they recommended that as the talk title for today. Who can say no to that sentiment, Still I Rise? There's three things that I want us to consider and play with today. There's going to be some life work that I'm going to offer you, and it's my fondest hope that you will say, yes, I'm going to try that on. With the notion of Still I Rise, this fits well with some of the things that Ernest Holmes identified. It fits well with some of the things that the larger Center for Spiritual Living assert. For example, the notion of envisioning a humanity awakening to its spiritual magnificence and discovering the creative power of thought. Now, when you got up this morning, were you aware of your magnificence? Did you get up and stretch your arms and just say, look at the magnificence that I am? experiencing head shaking.
No.
Okay, so no. So what is it to hold on to that notion of magnificence? At Centers for Spiritual Living, and what Ernest Holmes proposed, and what so many ministers in this movement and practitioners in this movement hold out as an offering, is that the divine, that which created all that is, that which is this moment is unfolding. How does this moment unfold? And how does this next moment happen? Did you produce it? Did you individually say, yes, I am making this moment? There is something bigger. There is something so extraordinary that an entire universe is operating. Maya Angelou remembered that no matter what came before her, no matter what she passed through, there was always an openness for a magnificence. There was always an openness for something greater. Centers for Spiritual Living also proposed this as a belief to try on. We believe that the realm of heaven is within us. And we experience this realm to the extent, to the degree that we become conscious of it. So how do we wake up feeling magnificence? How do we move in moment by moment into a sense of the vastness of this whole universe? And while we can stand in awe of that, to not get sucked into the notion that, well, I'm so little, I can't matter. Because that may be what happens sometime. Who here has ever had a bad day or a bad thing happen to them? Okay, I'm seeing a nod. I'm seeing a nod. In this teaching, in this notion of our thoughts create our realities, it can become a very calamitous walk to think, okay, that we can get caught in navel gazing. How am I responsible for this terrible thing? What in my consciousness created this horror? And what's worse, we can have people practicing this, and we share something, we share a vulnerability, we share a place where we are not feeling like the empowered beings that we actually are. We aren't feeling that. And we can hear the clicks, we can hear the sighs, we can hear the, it's your consciousness. And you just need to fix your consciousness. Let's just say for a moment that this is not specific to Centers for Spiritual Living, and this isn't just specific to New Thought churches. There's always a ton of judgment. There's always a ton of judgment about when things go wrong. I've talked about this several times, so this won't come as news, but there's a whole book in the Torah, in what was got adopted by Christians as the Old Testament. It belonged as the only testament for the Israelites. It was their testament. And the Christians were very happy to just pick it up and say, I like this. I'm going to take it with me. And the particular book is the book of Job. And I mentioned Job, and Job isn't like the happiest book. The setup is that Satan and the divine and God are like, God is like, my dude, Job is always going to be great. He is fine. He is a fine dude. And Satan's like, you want to bet? Now the thing is that God takes up the bet. The divine, the creator of all, takes up the bet. And then Satan ransacks, or, just takes him out. All of his children are gathered and the house collapses on top of him. He has this beautiful harvest ready, and the locusts descend. So his family is gone, his land is gone, everything he owned is gone. And Job is not as immediately resilient, like Reverend Michael said. He doesn't turn around and say, this is my opportunity. Thank you, oh divine light, for this opportunity where every one of my children was smashed in my house. So not only is my house gone, all of my children are gone, and my property is gone, and everything's gone, and this is a great chance. I love this chance. Thank you. He pauses in response to what's going on. And while he's pausing, he's got neighbors that are passing judgment. And there's two broad theories that get spoken into his neighbors, or by his neighbors. The one is the notion that, Job was okay. This calamity that befell him must be the sign of his children being nasty, or his family, his parents being nasty, and nobody knew it. But God knew it, and God struck him down. And the other theory was, no, his children and his parents and his family were fine, it's him. He's got some hidden flaw, and now it's been made visible to the world. Maya Angelou described that still I rise. In the face of all that she went to as an individual human being, she had so many terrible things happen in her life. And it took her some time. There was a time where she was selectively mute, where the risk of speaking seemed greater than staying silent. She asked in one of her writings about the reason that the caged bird doesn't sing. But what she navigated was that she could determine the boundaries on her cage. She didn't have to simply look at her cage. She was able to recognize and realize that the power of her life was within her. This wasn't that people turned around and treated her differently. This wasn't that somehow suddenly people recognized her power, her beauty, her magnificence. This was that she became aware that she was a place of magnificence. Just for a moment, lean into the fact that there is something unstoppable, inexhaustible, inextinguishable, unchangeable. I'm going to say that again. Unstoppable, inexhaustible, inextinguishable, unchangeable. There is that which is the foundation of all creation. We may feel stopped. We may feel exhausted. We may feel extinguished. We may feel changed. And we have the opportunity to choose. Do I choose to land and stay in those feelings? Michael and I have both talked about that. The what psalm is it? It's the psalm where though I walk through the valley of darkness. Psalm 23. Though I walk through the valley of darkness. The psalm is about walking through. The psalm isn't about building a condo there and paying fees to stay there. It's holding out that there is something, there is a force, there is a power, there is a presence which is forever ready to express itself. And we have to ask ourselves, am I going to be a means through which this rises and gives voice? Whoever has seen a dandelion, one little dandelion, and it could grow up in the most unlikely of all places. You know, you're walking on the sidewalk was just laid, and yet there is a dandelion coming up on this brand new laid sidewalk. And you're like, how did that get there? And that dandelion flower, it pops up and it's just this little sunny, cheerful looking thing. But then it transforms and it becomes this white, this white fluff, this white, just, it can vibrate in the wind. And then, how many of you as kids ever picked a dandelion and blew on it? And you just saw those seeds go everywhere. And it's not like the thing about these seeds is that they're just all this aerodynamic miracle. So that, we blow on it, and it just takes off. There needs to be no wind whatsoever. It just takes off. It's like the birds that are soaring, and there's no wind, but they found the current somewhere. Those dandelion seeds find a current, and they just go. Not far from Northern Lights Spiritual Center, not far from this place, there's a whole section of places where they ripped down the houses and they put in new houses, but while the houses were waiting to be put in and while the soil was there, they had fields of dandelions because that's how these things work. And I use this story about the dandelions because that's really how life is. That life is going to rise up no matter what. But, and the practice is this, the homework, the life work is this. It's like, am I going to let myself be run down, or am I going to follow the opening that Maya Angelou proposed? If I feel that I've been trod into the dirt, am I going to let myself be the dust that rises? Maybe we don't like comparing ourselves to dust, but dust can get everywhere. Has anybody ever seen, the property, that next door place? And the dust is everywhere. And the dust rises. Still we rise. We can rise. We can rise up. And it depends on a choice. Can we catch ourselves at our choice points? And even when we haven't chosen to rise up, can we give ourselves the grace to say, hey, I missed that opportunity, but that doesn't mean I have to miss it every time after that. I missed it now, but I can get it the next time it comes around. And the next time it comes around is when I think about it again. Because one of the things that this teaching proposes is that our thoughts have power. And that we unshackle ourselves from the power that we've let take over us. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about after the we rise up is this notion of that judgment about our pain. In New Thought, at spiritual centers like Centers for Spiritual Living, there can be this reticence to say what's really going on for fear of that notion of being judged. Or if we say what's going on and someone's like, it'll all be good. Your car wreck, it's a good thing. It's really a good thing that your car doesn't work. And we hear that, and that's not sympathetic. And it gets worse when they say, I wonder what was in your consciousness that car wreck happened. Because you really have to look at your consciousness. It's like, sister, you look at your consciousness. Don't be on my consciousness about this. We have to be selective about who it is with whom we're willing to share stuff. If we know that someone's going to judge us, that's an act of self-care to say, I'm not going there with this person. It's not our individual duties to be a New Thought missionary and turn them around about the power of thinking. And it's not our duty to explain kind of the nuance of it. Again, I've talked about this before, but I am operating in a universe that is shared with others. I have my thoughts. Our practitioner, Stephanie Scranton, has her thoughts. And these thoughts, they mix and they combine, and sometimes they intersect. And it's not just a world with me and Stephanie. There's Michael, and there's Phyllis, and there's Reverend Pamela, and there's Reba, and there's Sherry, and there's how many people in our individual lives that circle out from there. We are parts of immense communities. So we get to be thoughtful about where we share and think about and explore our experiences of pain and suffering. Again, I've spoken about this, but I want to bring it back to people's attention. I remember when I started right after college, I was in a training program, a ministry training program that was for people that wanted to contribute to the world. And the contributions were through social services, they were through teachings, they were through youth ministry. And one of the things that the director of the program said is that while we wish everyone had an experience of love, what we actually know is universal is the experience of suffering. And I was kind of bummed by that notion. And yet it was something that was strangely captured me, because when I entered the program, out of all of my colleagues, I was the only one that didn't have a job yet. Everybody else had a position, and I didn't have one yet. And I can tell you, some of my interviews were really terrible. I had been, when I went to the one interview, I had been awake for a series of 90-some hours. So I really was not at my best. And I remember the question was, how would you engage? What you enjoy? What really excites you? Because kids need to be excited. I was applying for a youth ministry position. Kids really need to know what excites you, and I'm I'm excited about just about everything. I've noticed while I've been hearing the interview that you have this little ant trail that's going through the room. Yes, I mentioned the ant trail in the room rather than about how interesting and fascinating the people that were interviewing me were. No, I mentioned the ant trail. And the look on their faces when I mentioned the Antral was clear. This guy is a loser. And this is not the person that we want with our youths.
Oh, kids love that.
This is not what we want with our youths. The kids might have loved it. But I think that they were very apprehensive that they were going to something to say, I can be entertained by ants. I'm very simple-minded. I can hardly do anything. Thanks. The notion of that mistake, that I was part of this group, helped me connect with John Reed's statement about the universality of suffering. And the universality of suffering does not have to mean the conclusion that many people come to. When we see that suffering is part of how the world works, sometimes we come to the conclusion that, well, that proves there's no God. That proves there's no God who's good. That proves there's no God who's powerful. That proves all kinds of things. And if you're looking for proof, well, sure, maybe it does prove that, but also maybe it proves that the person coming up with these proofs is kind of simple-minded. Have you ever heard an interesting story where everything is, it starts out they were happy and then they end up happily ever after? That's not the course of stories that are compelling, stories that capture us. I mean, one of the things about Maya Angelou is that she went through hell and came back. The story of, like, Barack Obama. This was not a man who always had an easy life. It's like everything was handed to him on a golden platter. But this was a man who rose up and was bigger than any circumstances that came before him. I remember during his presidency, sometimes I just wished that he was a little bit nastier. People would say things about him, and he would just let it roll like water from a duck. You know, he had a ridiculous dork question his birthplace. A complete idiot who raised that question for years. Oh, that complete idiot went on to become the president after him. And in the face of that, in the face of well-deserved, like, bitching and moaning and suffering and crying and being unhappy, this was a person who continually responded with grace. This was a person who was so intentional and so deliberate about not rising to the bait. And what I completely failed to understand is, because I was so unfamiliar with what it meant to be black in the United States, is that as a white person with male genitals and born that way, I have automatic privilege. I have automatic action. If I want to raise my voice, I can raise it. What I didn't have the same right to was when I cried in response to hearing about a family's difficulty. I was not so well respected and not so well identified when I didn't come across as an arbiter of strength. And the thing that Barack Obama and so many people of color have to deal with is that they have to realize that there is a hugely reactive white privilege that is just waiting to pounce on everything and say, see, that's what's oppressive wasn't to me. I'll also throw in the Buddha beyond Barack Obama. The Buddha, if you know the story, the Buddha's father met with a prophet. And the prophet said, either your son will become the greatest military leader of all time, or your son will become one of the greatest religious, spiritual leaders of all time. Now, rather than being delighted at this, how could he go wrong? How could he go wrong to Dad? In fact, my preference would be I really like the spiritual leader. But his dad didn't like that at all. His dad was horrified by that. So his dad did everything to make it so that young Siddhartha did not have any experience of pain or suffering. And you would think that raised in such pronounced privilege that he might not care. But the fact was that it was a series of 3 incidents in the world where he learned, inadvertently, his dad didn't want this to happen, he learned about suffering in the world, and this is what put him on his path. It's what put him on the path away from the leadership that his dad had hoped so strongly for, to the other leadership that his dad did not want at all. My teacher John Reed's notion that suffering is what connects us all. Siddhartha looked inside of his own heart and saw that his lack of experience had kept him blind to what was going on so much in the world. So, the homework connected to this is to be able to hold a space of gratitude for the suffering, the pain, the events that go contrary to what we want as openings, as breaks in our souls, so that we are better able to reach out, so that we are better able to sympathize, so that we are better able to connect with and be with. To look to our suffering with a place of gratitude for what it creates in us. Now, I'm not saying that this practice is easy. Nobody feels miserable and says, thank you, I'm so glad to have this miserable feeling. But to step back and to have gratitude for the capacity, the notion that when we break a bone, after it heals, it's stronger than before it was broken. If anybody's ever seen the drama Bones, she's a forensic anthropologist and she works with an FBI agent, and the gist of it is that they are able to figure out what happened because she's able to study the bones and look at what happened to the bones. To study those breaks and to let those breaks give insight into the life and the workings. When we pass through this suffering, what was it that this opened to us? What was it that this, how did this shift and change our story? I mean, I can still talk about the fact that I paid attention to ants as a story. It was completely stupid, but connect with others who say stupid things at the wrong time. And I don't have to make fun of them because I know what it's like to be tired and vulnerable. It's to realize that I spoke before I thought. Has anybody else ever done that? To speak before you think? But it gives me a greater sensitivity to that. And this leads directly to the third notion, that nothing has to be wasted. Now, lots of stuff gets wasted, but we can choose not to waste stuff. This teaching proposes that everything arises from the divine. Everything. There is nothing that is outside the scope of the divine, and nothing is wasted. Everything can be a place of lesson. Everything can be a place of teaching. Everything can be a place of expanded understanding. When I talked in the second point about that suffering connects us with other people, there's a whole unnamed party that I won't mention that is really about grievances, about the tragedy of white people not to have the same kind of power white people have always had. The tragedy of men people not having complete power over women's bodies. And this aggrieved, grievance-minded group is very happy to try to set limits and try to restrain others. Now you may be asking, how is that good that nothing is wasted? Nothing. The notion, though, is that this is calling forward a rising up. This pressing down and pushing aside is making people ask questions aloud, questions that weren't possible before. Again, going back to Barack Obama, as a liberal-minded white person, I thought, wow, this proves that the country is so much better than it is. And it didn't do that at all. What it did is it gave rise to a narcissistic white supremacist who is more than happy to help us see how broad that white supremacy lives in the world. The nothing wasted aspect is that has come to light. And I'm sure most black people would say, it's been well known by us. Losers like you need to finally pick up on this. But it becomes a point where some people are able to recognize. We can choose to look at the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor as wastes. And I think there's a truth to that. Absolutely. I feel there's a truth to that. And it doesn't have to be only that. And their deaths have illustrated harms that are so pervasive through our society that have been blandly and blindly unacknowledged for so long. And that can't continue. I've talked before about that story of the farmer who has conversations with his neighbor. about a series of events. So he goes to his neighbor the one day and he said, last night my fence broke and my stallion escaped. Like, ooh, that's bad. Isn't that bad? Isn't that a terrible thing? And his neighbor's like, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. And the stallion was brought back while his son was fixing the fence. His son got injured. He's like, isn't that terrible? My stallion is back, but my son's injured. And the neighbor's like, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. And when the army comes to recruit his son the next day, they're like, oh, we don't want him because of injury. But we want the stallion. But the stallion had managed to, so they take the stallion but leave the son. But the stallion had managed to impregnate a whole bunch of the neighboring horses. And so the one stallion who went off to war and disappeared, the stallion's children were left. So maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. We get to choose how we respond to something even when we see it as bad. Even when we identify it as a waste, we get to choose in the possibility that something may emerge from this, that there may be a benefit that we aren't imagining. So, the 3 points: still we rise, we all suffer, and nothing is wasted. Nothing has to be wasted. We get to choose. We get to choose that when we are trodden upon the soil, that like the dust we rise. We get to choose that when our suffering pushes us down, do we stay down or do we get up? Do we find allies who will stand with us to pick us up? And how do we see through the circumstances that these events that occur in our lives, that we can choose that those are places of waste or not? So I have an affirmation for us. So, repeat after me. Divine power rises in me and makes me free. So that's the affirmation. Divine power rises in me and makes me free. Okay, so I'm going to say it and then you repeat. Divine power rises in me.
Divine power rises in me
and makes me free.
And makes me free.
Divine power rises in me.
Divine power rises in me
and makes me free.
And makes me free.
And finally, divine power rises in me.
Divine power rises in me.
And makes me free.
And makes me free.
Free.
And so it is.
So it is. Trying to rise up these old bones. Thank you, Reverend Vaughan, for showing us that there is the potential, if we choose, to rise up through all the trials and tribulations we may go through. Like the idea of we get to choose to rise up, or we can remain a victim and stay down. And so I just want to thank everyone who's here on Zoom and on Facebook and in the room. You are greatly appreciated. For your presence, for your power, for your passion, for all that you are, and all that you give to this center, no matter what way you give. Because the giver is the gift, in my opinion. I believe that the giver is the gift. And so if you choose to donate to Northern Light Spiritual Center, you may go to our website, which is northernlightspiritualcenter.com, and donate. And we'll be here again next week, the starting of October, which is unbelievable that it will be October already. Let's see. And so I just give thanks for this time together. I give thanks for the hallowed ground here and wherever you are. For wherever you are is hallowed ground. It is sacred ground. Wherever you stand, wherever you sit, wherever you position yourself, because you are sacred, is sacred ground. And I give thanks for the choice that we have to either rise up from whatever may have taken us down, that we may rise up and we're better for it. I give thanks for that idea that nothing has to be wasted and that no one has to be wasted. That each of us and everything, no matter what it may look like at the time, can be a gift. It can allow us to be stronger. It can allow us to be changed for the better. And so I give thanks for every person involved here today, participating. And I release it, and I know that it is so, and so it is. And for those of you on Zoom, you can hang around for the post-talk
Reflection.
conversation. And thank you.